Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Welcome one and all. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening right here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website, republicbroadcasting.org. Today is Saturday, April 4th, 2015. This show is live every Saturday evening from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9 p.m. to midnight Central Time. We have a great show lined up for you here tonight. I'm going to be talking about the fear of self-defense and the fear of rebellion against tyranny. Why do people fear these things, or why do they believe that somehow they should never be engaged in? And many people do believe those things. Many people do feel like that. So what are the psychological factors going on in their minds? What is the logic, so-called logic, that's going on in their minds that makes them fear self-defense and fear righteous rebellion? We're going to be talking about this on the show tonight. I'm actually going to be reading a couple of articles that deal with things such as this, and then I'll be going to your calls, and we'll be taking many calls throughout the show. So the call-in number to join us, ladies and gentlemen, for this edition of What on Earth is Happening, 800-313-9443. Once again, the call-in number to join us, 800-313-9443. A couple of quick announcements. This coming weekend, less than a week away, Free Your Mind 3, the biggest conference of its kind in this country, possibly throughout the world, in the year of 2015. April 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's next weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, April 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2015, at the Sheraton Bucks County Hotel, just outside of Philadelphia, at 400 North Oxford Valley Road in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. The speakers for Free Your Mind 3, Bob Tuskin, Clint Richardson, Curtis the Illuminated One Davis, Dennis McKenna, Derek Brose, Ed Fortune, the New Jersey Weedman, Freeman, Fritz Springmeyer, Jay Parker, Janice Barcelo, John Bush, John and Bonnie Mitchell, John Vibes, Josie the Outlaw Wales, Laura Eisenhower, Lennon Honor, Mark Devlin, myself, Mark Passio, Ross Ben, Steve Stars, Stuart Swerdlow, an alternative media panel featuring Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change, the Free Thought Project, and the Anti-Media. A meeting of the minds, speaker panel discussion with many of the speakers from the conference, open mic night sessions featuring members of the audience, and a showing of Dan Fogler's movie, Don Peyote. An all-weekend pass for the Free Your Mind 3 conference, only $150. The website, freeyourmindconference.com. Get your tickets if you don't have them already. You can get them right up to the days of the conference. or you can get them at the door at the same price. freeyourmindconference.com is the website. I hope to see many, many people just outside of Philadelphia next weekend. I know I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be giving a presentation on Saturday evening entitled The Cult of Ultimate Evil, Order Followers, and the Destruction of the Sacred Feminine. That is my presentation title for this year's conference. It's going to be a very hard-hitting presentation. It's going to be a presentation that may be difficult for some people to hear because of the religious beliefs that they are still subjecting their mind to. And I mean the religion of authority, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the Free Your Mind Conference coming up at us next weekend. It's just going to be a huge event, and I hope that it's jam-packed, and I hope to see many of you there. The What on Earth is Happening promotional t-shirt original design has sold out. So if you did get an order form, email me for an order form for one of those shirts. Please do not send orders for those because they are gone. And I don't think I'm going to be repressing that design because I have a new design that I've already pressed, and it is going to debut at Free Your Mind 3. I'll be bringing many of them to the conference, to table, at my personal table. And whatever is left over will be available to the public after the conference. So I'll be posting the design probably in the middle of this coming week, just to give people a little taste of what will be available at the conference, and so that people can get their orders in for after the event is over. So to receive a promotional T-shirt, you could click on the promotional T-shirt link that will be posted on the left-hand side of the website this coming week. I think I'm going to post it on probably on Tuesday, April 7th. So 3 days from today, I'll post the new T-shirt design on the website. Also, there is a donation button on the left-hand side of the whatonearthishappening.com website. If you feel that you have received value from the information that has been presented and shared on both the What on Earth is Happening radio show and on my website through my podcasts and my videos, you can feel free to make a voluntary donation to help support my work so that I can continue it into the future. Also, RBN has been hosting a donation drive to help support the network and keep it on the airwaves. You can donate to RBN by phone. You could pledge a donation by phone by calling toll-free 800-724-2719. Once again, that number, 800-724-2719. You could also go to the PayPal link on the donation tab at republicbroadcasting.org. That'll take you right to their PayPal donation. And there is also a mailing address if you want to send a check, a donation by check. The mailing address is 2251 Double Creek Drive, Suite 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. So if you are in a position to do so, please help out the network. They could definitely use it, and that's what it's all about. This network is listener supported, and your donations help keep it going. So I want to direct everyone's attention to the whatonearthishappening.com radio show page. If you're not already listening there, of course, underneath the player for live broadcast, there are images for tonight's show. The first two images, there's only 3 images up there this evening. The first 2 images are posters for the Free Your Mind 3 conference. You could feel free to share them. And the third image is a meme that was made regarding the latest topic that I have been covering on the show over the last few weeks, which is gun ownership and gun ownership rights, and the Second Amendment in particular. I just completed giving an extended version of my true meaning and purpose of the Second Amendment presentation that I originally gave a couple months back here in Philadelphia. I gave this extended presentation on the air over the last few weeks and got a lot of positive feedback and responses from people. And a listener that posts to a Facebook group that is dedicated to my work he created a meme of me from that presentation, a photo of me from the Second Amendment presentation with my AK-47, and underneath it, it is a quote from me that says, "If there are no guns in your country, that means slavery was perfected there." It's a quote that I came out with during the first half of my Second Amendment presentation that I gave live on the airwaves a few weeks back. And I was pretty riled up during that show because I was thinking about all the efforts that are being made to try to curtail gun ownership rights, and how many states in the United States have completely unconstitutional and immoral gun laws on the books that have no business having ever been enacted whatsoever. And having been thinking about that over the days before I was doing that particular presentation, the vitriol definitely was raised in me, let's just say. But this meme, I tried to kind of get it to spread as much as possible on Facebook, because a lot of people need to hear words spoken just like that. Because so many people think it's so wonderful and great that there's no guns in their country, that the citizenry has been disarmed, and therefore they have absolutely no means of resistance against tyrannical government. And they somehow think that isn't going to happen in their country, when it has happened repeatedly, time and time and time again throughout history. Genocide by a tyrannical government. So people like that, in my opinion, are just completely naive. They have the mindset of little children. And, as much as I'll, directly come out and say how I feel about people like that, I would still encourage them, if they're living, anybody who's from a country where the citizenry has been disarmed, like let's say England or Australia has been largely disarmed. Germany has almost been completely disarmed, not entirely, but it's most of the way there. If anybody wants to call in from any of these locations, I'd like to hear what you think about your nation's populace being disarmed and basically at the mercy of your governments. Because let me tell you something, folks. One thing I know is not going to happen here. The citizenry is not going to be disarmed in America. You can bet on that as sure as you can bet on the sun rising on the eastern horizon tomorrow morning. Okay? That's one thing I'll guarantee you with my dying breath. They can try all they want. They could pull however many false flags they want to try to pull. It's all nonsense. It's all a big act to try to tug on the heartstrings of people and say, oh, look at how many more children have to be killed. You know how many more? Every single person on the face of the earth. How about that? You want a number? There's the number. Then you'll have no more gun owners in America. When every person on the face of the earth is gone. And not a minute until. You're never going to get that done. All the Marxists and socialists and communists and fascists and Nazis out there. You're never going to get it done here. But they'll keep trying, folks. Believe it. Believe me, they'll keep trying. One thing I do want to mention before I get into some of the material I want to cover here tonight. I neglected to mention this last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. Just letting people know, I didn't do a live show last week. There was a little bit of confusion on the network end of things, and scheduling got a little bit messed up, and I just didn't prepare a show and didn't go live. So it was just some back end confusion and complication that took place. So that's all been worked out and everything is fine. But I didn't do it. 2 weeks ago I did do a show, and it was during, I believe, the very first week of the Season of Sacrifice, the Occult Season of Sacrifice, as it is known. That show was on March 21st, and the Season of Sacrifice is a 40-day time period that runs from March 19th through May 1st. It is a time period during which the dark occultists that basically are running Earth do sacrificial rituals and blood sacrifices on a mass scale to essentially basically pay homage to the gods that they believe in, the entities that they believe have to be appeased, and many of them do believe in entities such as that. Many of them do not. And they also pull these false flag events, these human sacrifice ritualistic events, in order to instill large amounts of fear, to inject large amounts of fear into the populace so that they can sway their minds in a particular direction that they want them to go in. This is, of course, has been referred to politically as false flag events, but they often take the place of ritualistic human sacrifices that are not always, but very often done in a location that is the name of a goddess figure. Okay, so you'll see Columbine High School. Columbia is the dove. The dove is a representation of the goddess. Virginia Tech, the Virgin. Okay, another representation of the goddess. The Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. Again, Colum means dove. Aurora, another Greek interpretation of the goddess. Okay, so the Aurora shootings. You'll see this on and on and on in many of the rituals that they do, and we're in the thick of it right now. April is their favored month to pull one of these sacrificial rituals. Some people think that one has already been done and was the crashing of this plane with 150 people on it into the French Alps, this German plane. So it is quite possible that that was one of these Season of Sacrifice rituals. If so, it's kind of a light one, if you will, because it's not quite what I would call a false flag, but who knows the reasons that something like that may have been done deliberately. So it's been suggested that may have been one of these rituals. I'm not speculating either way on that, but I am saying that this is the time period to really be vigilant for false flag events, especially mass shooting events. Like the Port Arthur massacre, which was, I believe, done during the Season of Sacrifice as well. That was, we had our Sandy Hook, which was supposed to be like the Port Arthur massacre to get all the gun laws, enacted against semi-autos, etc., here in the United States. And it didn't work out the way that they planned, because a lot of people saw right through the Sandy Hook false flag. It's like one of these things where absolutely no part of it stands up on its own, no part of it makes sense, just like the official story of 9/11, which was another one of these ritualistic sacrifices, not during the Season of Sacrifice, but certainly a sacrificial mass human sacrifice ritual event that was a false flag / inside job. But I just wanted to put that out there. I am not going to do an entire re-evaluation of what the Season of Sacrifice is. If you want that, you can get that in former podcasts and learn all about it and what their belief system is regarding that, the dark occult. But I just wanted to let people know we are in the thick of the Season of Sacrifice. April, particularly around April 19th and 20th, for some reason they really like to bring mass events out around that time period, although they do it earlier in the month of April many times. So keep an eye out, be vigilant. It is very possible that a false flag event is on the way, because this is their favorite time of year to pull them out. We'll be right back, folks. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening.
We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. So before the break, I was talking a little bit about the Season of Sacrifice, how we're in the middle of it, and and warning people that they should just be vigilant for the possibility of false flag events. And if it does happen, tell everybody that this is a staged event. They always are. And, it's always for an alternative agenda to try to get gun control measures passed, or to just try to inject enough fear into the population that these controllers can get whatever agenda that they want to accomplish through with as little resistance from the public as possible. The answer is being aware of how they pull this tactic and therefore eliminating its effects. So, going back to the main topic, I was saying that I'd like to get some calls from people later on in the show, if anyone wants to call in, from countries that have been largely disarmed or completely disarmed their populace, and see what they have to say about something like that, and what, if anything, they feel can be done about that deplorable situation. So, if there is anybody listening from countries such as that, feel free to call in. Again, the toll-free number, 800-313-9443. Before I go to calls later on in the show, however, I want to read a couple of articles related to the topic of gun ownership and self-defense, and the psychological fear of self-defense, which is the main focus. But before we get into that particular topic, I want to read an article that is about the gun being a symbol of civilization, which I ended my Second Amendment presentation podcast on that note, that it is said the gun is civilization. And I'm in complete agreement with that sentiment personally. I think if everyone was armed, a society would be extremely more polite to each other, because that everybody has equality in deadly force capability, and therefore everybody's going to be a little bit more hesitant, shall we say, to infringe upon other people's natural rights if they knew everybody had that capacity. So this article is called "The Gun is Civilization," and it's by Major L. Caudil. I think I'm pronouncing that right, or Caudil. Retired Marine. So I'm going to comment possibly occasionally during the reading of these articles, as I've done before on the show, so just bear with that. If I want to make a point during, I'll make my point and then say I'm continuing with the article now, to give you a distinction of when is the article and when I'm making a commentary on it. And I'll also post these articles with the podcast, of course. So this is called "The Gun is Civilization." Human beings only have two ways to deal with one another: reason and force. If you want me to do something for you, you have a choice of either convincing me via argument or force me to do your bidding under threat of force. Every human interaction falls into one of these two categories without exception: reason or force. That's it. In a truly moral and civilized society, people exclusively interact through persuasion. Force has no place as a valid method of social interaction. And the only thing that removes force from the menu is the personal firearm, as paradoxical as it may sound to some. When I carry a gun, you cannot deal with me by force. You have to use reason and try to persuade me, because I have a way to negate your threat or employment of force. The gun is the only personal weapon that puts a 100-pound woman on equal footing with a 220-pound mugger, a 75-year-old retiree on equal footing with a 19-year-old gangbanger, and a single guy on equal footing with a carload of drunk guys with baseball bats. The gun removes the disparity in physical strength, size, or numbers between a potential attacker and a defender. There are plenty of people who consider the gun as the source of bad force equations. These are the people who think that we'd be more civilized if all guns were removed from society, because a firearm makes it easier for an armed mugger to do his job. That, of course, is only true if the mugger's potential victims are mostly disarmed, either by choice or by legislative fiat. It has no validity when most of a mugger's potential marks are armed. So I hear the break music coming up, folks. I'll continue this article called "The Gun is Civilization" on the other side of this break. Stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. I'm going to jump right back in and continue with the article entitled "The Gun is Civilization." People who argue for the banning of arms ask for automatic rule by the young, the strong, and the many. And that's the exact opposite of a civilized society. A mugger, even an armed one, can only make a successful living in a society where the state has granted him a force monopoly. Then there's the argument that the gun makes confrontations lethal that would otherwise only result in injury. This argument is fallacious in several ways. Without guns involved, confrontations are won by the physically superior party, inflicting overwhelming injury on the loser. People who think that fists, bats, sticks, or stones don't constitute lethal force watch too much TV, where people take beatings and come out of it with a bloody lip at worst. The fact that the gun makes lethal force easier works solely in the favor of the weaker defender, not the stronger attacker. If both are armed, the field is level. The gun is the only weapon that's as lethal in the hands of an octogenarian as it is in the hands of a weightlifter. It simply wouldn't work as well as a force equalizer if it wasn't both lethal and easily employable. When I carry a gun, I don't do so because I am looking for a fight, but because I'm looking to be left alone. The gun at my side means that I cannot be forced, only persuaded. I don't carry it because I'm afraid, but because it enables me to be unafraid. It doesn't limit the actions of those who would interact with me through reason. Only the actions of those who would do so by force. It removes force from the equation, and that's why carrying a gun is a civilized act. Absolutely phenomenal article, ladies and gentlemen. I'll post it with the podcast. Anybody who doesn't understand the pure and simple logic that is contained in that article, I don't know what's wrong with them, but they are clearly brainwashed by the state. That's all I'll say. And you know, it's funny because so many people can get things halfway. You know, this is by a retired Marine who is an order follower in one way and yet fully understands, you know, the self-defense principle in another way. You see a lot of this going on where there's only still partial enlightenment everywhere throughout society. And this is one of the main problems. There's not total enlightenment. You don't have a whole lot of people in the populace that fully understand both the sacred feminine principle of non-aggression, do not initiate force against your fellow sentient beings, and simultaneously deeply understand the sacred masculine principle of self-defense, which is if someone else does violate your inherent rights and has come at you with violence that is violating your right to be left unaccosted and unharmed, you have a right to defend yourself with physical force against that attack. Period. And that includes the threat of attack. That includes coercion. That includes being put under the state known as duress. You have a right to end the state of duress when you are threatened continuously with violence. The only thing that I would have liked to have seen someone like this do in his language and wording, in his verbiage, is to just use the word violence everywhere he used the word force. Then I think the article would be practically perfect. Because force isn't violence. We understand what he's saying. To coerce someone to do something. To do it by coercion. I prefer the term violence wherever it can be used in place of force, because it means that you are violating someone else's rights, and it becomes much less ambiguous when used like that in human language. There's a big problem with the obfuscation of force and violence, which I tried to clarify repeatedly in my natural law seminar and in the material here on What on Earth is Happening. In any event, that's the first article that I wanted to read, and anybody that wants to comment on that is, feel free to do so. I'll post that with the podcast, of course. The next article I want to jump right into is called Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution. And this is a absolutely brilliant article by Brandon Smith. I don't really know Brandon Smith. I know he is a blog writer for a couple of different blogs, but after reading this article, I just think that he has a very spot-on perspective and a brilliant mind, and I commend him for writing this. And this fits in with the topic I want to talk about here tonight, which is the fear of rebellion. Why so many people are against rebellion against tyranny. So many people think, it was great that the founding fathers did it, and the Revolutionary Army and the colonists in the United States rebelled against a totally psychopathic king, but somehow we're in such a different situation today. Less of our rights are being violated and not more? We're under less coercion, we're under less threat of violence, we're under less duress here in America today than we were back in, the late 18th century, in the late 1700s. How is that possible? Because you could have fooled me, folks, I mean, the things that our forefathers here in America went to war over and were willing to dispatch other people over were far less egregious than what's taking place in America today, where 1,000 people a year are being murdered without trial by police in America. And we don't think we have an epidemic of police violence, of police criminality, while our military forces are being used to serve global elitist bankers and being sent to kill people that pose no threat to us. Only a threat that's whipped up in the minds of people by the media, by the complicit yellow journalist, propagandist media in this country, who are bought and paid for liars. So, my point here, to go back to it, is why are so many people in such psychological fear of self-defense and rebellion, particularly when it comes to rebellion against an unethical and unlawful government? So this article is going to explore some of these psychological dynamics, or the arguments against rebellion against tyranny, or simply revolution, as Brandon puts it in this article. I prefer the term rebellion to the term revolution, because rebellion takes on a little bit more of a righteous connotation, and revolution has that idea of you're going around again, Righteous physical rebellion can be the same as righteous revolution. The two terms, I'm not trying to split hairs here. They can be used interchangeably. I simply prefer the term rebellion, particularly rebellion against tyranny. So here's the article. It's entitled Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution by Brandon Smith. Our era is a strange one when considering how social attitudes have developed in such a contrary fashion to the rest of history. I think that our forefathers would look upon our current culture with bewilderment when confronted with the fact that our generation has all but abandoned the option of physical rebellion as a tool for social change. Even amongst the most enslaved of nations and peoples, the idea of revolution has been held in regard as an entirely moral and principled affair involving every individual, no matter their age or economic station. Today, however, that which we call, quote, revolution has been delegated mostly to college-age intellectuals and has been so watered down and whitewashed with politically correct restrictions that the concept is hardly recognizable. I believe the civil rights movements in America and in India in the 20th century have in many ways warped the public view of how opposition to totalitarianism is actually accomplished. I find it interesting that movements led by Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. enjoy so much adoration in the mainstream media and in public schooling, while the American Revolution is often either misrepresented or not discussed at all. Gandhi's movement was, in concrete terms, a failure until Indians had actually began organizing to physically fight the British, causing the Crown to attempt to defuse the movement by suddenly offering up a reformation of Indian governance, one that would continue to benefit them, of course meaning the British. When one examines the facts surrounding COINTELPRO operations by the FBI and CIA during the civil rights movement in America, one realizes that half the efforts and actions were legitimate and the other half entirely manipulated. Over the course of half a century, the philosophy of, quote, anti-violence has come to include a distinct distaste for self-defense. Self-defense is now consistently equated to, quote, violence, and is thus immoral in other people's minds, regardless of environmental circumstances. Even in the liberty movement, there are people who disregard physical defense as either barbaric or futile, and have adopted rather less effective pacifist ideologies of more socialist activism. The problem with certain factions of libertarianism is that they tend to live within their own heads. I'm breaking in here for a moment because this phrase right here resonates deeply with me when it comes to the interaction with a lot of, quote, libertarians. And they have been known as Brandon will get to in a moment, the eggheads, the egghead libertarians. They're only putting forth all these intellectual ideas, but if someone suggests that someone that does not have a right to coerce someone should be dealt with in a physical fashion, then all of a sudden everybody backs up 10 steps. Whoa, we're only talking about ideas here. See, it's never something that's brought into the realm of actual action. This is what is so psychologically feared in the so-called truth and so-called freedom movements. Continuing with the article, the problem with certain factions of libertarianism is that they tend to live within their own heads, reveling in a world of Ayn Randian and Rothbardian political and social theory, while abandoning the other side of concrete resistance. Some in the survival community call these people, quote, egghead libertarians. And boy, is that true. And I think the label fits. I agree, Brandon, wholeheartedly. Continuing. They rejoice only in the intellectual. Thus they tend to see themselves only as, quote, intellectual warriors, unquote. For them, the war against tyranny, by extension, must be fought on an intellectual battlefield. Otherwise, as individuals, they have little to offer the resistance. They believe that if they merely present a better and more logical philosophy, they will win over the masses to their side or even change the souls of the rather soulless psychopaths creating the tyranny in the first place. Like magic, they will have won the fight without ever truly fighting. It sounds like a strategy right out of the art of war, but really, it is an intricate excuse designed to avoid risk. An intricate excuse designed to avoid risk. My emphasis. Continuing. They have almost no experience with, and therefore no respect for the concept of self-defense and revolution. And they have no capacity to fathom what such an endeavor would entail. This unknown scenario inspires fear in them, a fear of struggle, a fear of failure, and a fear of death. While taking action from a position of love for one's fellow man is indeed noble, it is sometimes not enough in the face of pure evil. The kind of evil inherent in the ranks of elitism and the globalist ideology. It is important to keep at least 1 foot on the ground when building a movement of dissent, and realize that while maintaining the moral high ground is paramount, there are limitations to what peaceful resistance can accomplish, depending on the opponent. Let me read that sentence again, because it is profound. It is profound and needs to be deeply contemplated by everyone out there. It is important to keep at least 1 foot on the ground when building a movement of dissent, and realize that while maintaining the moral high ground is paramount, there are limitations to what peaceful resistance can accomplish depending on the opponent. If you are not prepared to use both peaceful means and physical defense if necessary, your movement will ultimately fail against an enemy without conscience. Once again, I'm going to read that sentence again to let it sink in. If you are not prepared to use both peaceful means and physical defense if necessary, your movement will ultimately fail against an enemy without conscience. Never before in history have humans been so dismissive of the self-defense concept, and I attribute this to clever conditioning and to an ingrained and powerful fear. Here are some of the most commonly heard arguments against physical revolution and why they are either ill-conceived or outright disingenuous. And here is point number 1 that the people who are psychologically in fear of self-defense and rebellion against tyranny always try to bring up. Is revolution morally wrong? So he's asking this question. Revolution is morally wrong? Question mark. Is it? So continuing with the article, I think that's the break music coming up, is it?
Yes.
Okay. So We'll continue this on the other side of the break, ladies and gentlemen, reading the article from Brandon Smith, Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution, a absolutely brilliantly written article. We're going to pick up on the concept of, is physical rebellion, is revolution morally wrong? On the other side of this break, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. I'm reading an article on air called Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution by Brandon Smith. And I'm going to continue it right now with a section called Revolution is Morally Wrong? ? I find the attitude of moral superiority of the nonviolence crowd rather disconcerting at times, and in many ways dishonest. It is very common to run into nonviolence proponents who are not satisfied with their own personal choice of pacifism alone. In many cases, they will attack or undermine other parts of the movement preparing for self-defense on the basis that even mere preparation is somehow akin to physical aggression. These people are never satisfied until everyone in the movement meets their, quote, high standards, unquote, of activist purity. In the end, I think their position is less about a regard for peace than it is about a regard for their own egos. People in general tend to support the formation of taboos as opposed to honest principles in order to gain what they see as the moral upper hand over others. They invent a condition of arbitrary piety around themselves in an act of self-elevation that does not constitute true morality. Anyone who makes self-defense a taboo is not only living in a fantasy land outside the inherent structures of natural law, he is also likely doing so because he enjoys the sense of social superiority such a position affords. In this way, many of the more irrational nonviolence activists are, in fact, no better than the raving acolytes of the cult of political correctness. Hear, hear. Physical self-defense against tyranny is not only necessary, but entirely honorable. When the violence of an individual is thwarted by defense, when a potential thief robs the wrong house, when a rape is prevented by an armed and prepared woman, or when a potential murderer is shot dead by a citizen who refused to be a victim, our society cheers. But when someone suggests the same measures be taken against a violent and corrupt government, people suddenly claim moral hazard. There is no difference between the act of defending oneself against a common criminal and defending oneself against a criminal government. And I'm going to read that sentence again, ladies and gentlemen. Let that one get hammered into the brain a little bit. There is no difference between the act of defending oneself against a common criminal and defending oneself against a criminal government. I would venture to say that self-defense is a moral imperative, more vital to the survival of peace and freedom than any other. We'll pick this up on the other side, folks. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening.
That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We are talking about the psychological fear of self-defense that is so strong in the modern population due to social engineering, and why people are afraid of even the discussion of the thought of rebelling against tyrannical government physically. You know, the last sentence here says it all, in this last section on this article called Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution by Brandon Smith. He said, quote, "I would venture to say that self-defense is a moral imperative more vital to the survival of peace and freedom than any other." I mean, I'm in complete resonance with that sentiment. That is 100% spiritual truth right there. And people need to get that through their head, that is spiritually true. That's the problem, is you have religions like the New Age garbage movement pumping people's heads full of nonsense, that there's no place for self-defense in a civilized society. I mean, please. The religion of stand down. Don't stand up for yourself. Stand down. Take whatever violence is thrown at you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's real spiritual. You're so enlightened, aren't you? It's an absolutely deplorable garbage ideology that is based in self-loathing, that is based totally in fear. It's based in cowardice. Pure cowardice, as is pacifism. It's a deplorable, self-loathsome ideology, pacifism. I am all for peace, ladies and gentlemen, but I want no part of pacifism. They're two entirely different things. They are completely, diametrically opposed to each other. One of them fully embraces and incorporates the sacred feminine principle of non-aggression, while simultaneously bringing in the sacred masculine principle of self-defense. A true philosophy of peace is based in both of those sacred principles. Pacifism, on the other hand, totally throws out in the trash can the sacred masculine principle of self-defense and says somehow it's not valid. Well, I beg to differ. And anybody who wants to think that they're pursuing a spiritual path needs to get it right and understand both of those principles need to be in balance, in harmony, operating in union with each other. So this whole section that I just read, is revolution morally wrong? My question to the listening audience is, did the American revolutionaries during the Revolutionary War period, were they doing something that was moral? Were they somehow conducting immoral behavior by rebelling against the British, who were coming over here across an ocean and oppressing us at the behest of a psychopathic king? Taking people's rights away, raping their women, doing violence unto people in the street? Putting soldiers on the street, quartering them in people's homes? Completely destroying people financially, taking whatever they wanted. Whatever decree the king said was law was made into law, whether it was moral or not, whether it took people's rights away or not. So, did they somehow do something that was immoral by rebelling against that so-called authority? That totally criminal, psychopathic government? I beg to differ. They did something completely moral that was based in higher consciousness, which is called love. The American Revolution was an act of love. And if you don't think so, you have your philosophy all twisted up. And you don't understand what real enlightenment or real spirituality is at all. Not even a little bit. So let's continue with this article. Brandon Smith, Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution. The next section is entitled, Revolution is Futile and the Enemy is Too Strong, ? This is another fallacious argument that's brought up by people who are just cowards and want to say we should never even consider the notion of physical rebellion. So here we go. When anti-defense initiates cannot effectively argue against the moral principles of physical revolution, they invariably change tactics, asserting instead that revolution is a useless endeavor that will only end in tragedy for the participants. I see this argument as a product of brainless nihilism rather than rationalism, and such a defeatist mindset invariably stems from cowardice rather than logic. Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderfully written. Truer words could not be spoken. Nihilism is a powerful psychological force that destroys all hope and all positive pursuits. It is essentially the act of denying success before an endeavor is ever undertaken. Nihilists ensure their own failure because, for them, every scenario is a no-win scenario. To them, I might seem like a blind optimist, while they see themselves as realists. In truth, pro-self-defense activists are far more realistic. Advocates are far more realistic. There is certainly a fundamental difference in the manner in which we look at the world. When I and those, quote, optimists like me see a problem, we look for a solution, regardless of the scale of the threat. And if we cannot immediately find an obvious solution right away, we keep working until we do. There is no such thing as a no-win scenario for us. There is always a way to overcome an obstacle. The odds of success are not relevant where revolution against oligarchy is concerned. I would also point out the reality that at bottom, it does not matter what the odds are in a revolution for freedom. When all is said and done, you will probably be confronted with two choices in the face of tyranny: fight and possibly die, or surrender, become a slave, and probably still die. Those who argue against self-defense are, in most cases, trying to avoid the inevitability of this choice by creating non-options and non-solutions out of thin air. This is the opposite of realism. Physical revolution requires a methodology of adaptivity and courage. Fear has no place in the mind of a freedom fighter, and nihilism is just as foreign to him. The goal of liberty will be accomplished. Totalitarians will be defeated. The size of the movement is not a factor. We expect that we will be in the minority. There is no other outcome but victory because we will allow no other outcome, period. If we are proven wrong, then we are proven wrong. But it will not be due to a lack of trying. And there it is, folks. I'll read that again. The goal of liberty will be accomplished. Totalitarians will be defeated. The size of the movement is not a factor. We expect that we will be in the minority. There is no other outcome but victory, because we will allow no other outcome, period. If we are proven wrong, then we are proven wrong. But it will not be due to a lack of trying. In our age, arguments of the technological superiority of the enemy are often brandished as clear evidence of the uselessness of physical resistance. I think one could also make the argument that technological superiority in media manipulation and other fields could make nonviolent resistance useless as well. I'm not really sure why nihilists cling to the notion that technology matters at all, except that it perhaps offers an easy and lazy avenue of debate. The enemy has predator drones, therefore revolution is futile. In conjunction with Oath Keepers, I will soon be producing a video that will show the Liberty Movement how to build their own working thermal evasion suits. Perhaps this will quell the incessant proclamations that drones and tanks and Apache helicopters mean anything at all in the face of asymmetric warfare. If the enemy can't see you, they can't kill you. And for every high-tech enemy, there is a low-tech solution. Of course, I doubt this will mean anything to the nihilists, who don't have the will to fight for anything except their belief that fighting back is useless. That's right, Brandon, because these people are cowards. Cowards. And that's all it comes down to. The next section is entitled, Revolutions Are Always Co-opted? I have heard it argued by multiple sources within the liberty movement over the years that revolution is a poor option in defeating tyranny because of the cyclical nature of political and social change. They claim that all we have to do is look back at history to see that even when a revolution is successful in removing oligarchy, the resulting republic is invariably co-opted years or decades down the road. I agree, to a point. The problem is not that the concept of revolution is ineffective. What these skeptics of physical rebellion tend to overlook or deliberately ignore is that no revolution in the history of man has ever gone far enough. No revolution in the history of man has ever gone far enough. Each revolution has targeted the corrupt government of their day, but no revolution has actually removed the elitist cabal behind those regimes. The same cabal of elites that has bankrolled nearly every tyranny over the past several centuries. This is in part due to the fact that knowledge of who these elites are was not widespread. Today, for the first time ever, mankind has full access to information on who the globalists are and what they want. In fact, the elites barely hide who they are or what their intentions are anymore. One can simply look up the roster of organizations like Bilderberg, Tavistock, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, etc. At least in the liberty movement, we know who the real enemy is. Co-option is always a threat if you do not know who the enemy is. A revolution against the Obama administration alone, for example, would be useless because President Obama is nothing but a puppet, a mascot playing a role. That's exactly right. A good actor, but little less than that. Removing middlemen is a half measure, and anyone who tries to lead you into revolution on the premise that Obama alone is the source of your troubles is probably an elitist leading you toward disaster. If you are not removing the root of the threat will persist. Now, I'm going to chime in here for a moment. The real root of the threat is the ignorance of the population. It's not just the globalist cabal of elitists. It is the mindset of the people who are so ignorant and don't want to be free. They want to be ruled. That's the main problem, and that's where revolutions have stopped short. They've allowed all of these ignorant people to just breed up around them and to stay here. People who want to be ruled to stay where you just successfully accomplished a physical rebellion. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on this broadcast when I'm going to read a little bit of an article by Thomas Paine where he talks about Tories who were loyalists to the British Crown during the time of the American Revolution. And it parallels nicely with these couple of articles on, guns and gun ownership and rebellion, the fear of self-defense and rebellion against tyranny. Continuing with this section of the article called "Revolutions Are Always Co-opted?" ? Co-option also occurs when people become obsessed with the idea of popular top-down leadership rather than bottom-up decentralized resistance. If you are out there looking for the next George Washington on a white horse to save you from tyranny, then you will eventually get him. But he may not be all what he seems. Beware of generals and top brass suddenly in support of revolution. Beware of any notion of a military coup. Beware of any revolution that uses political party divisions as a motivator. Beware of any government with a central bank that wishes to bankroll your revolution. Stay decentralized and refuse any push for top-down leadership. This is the only way to avoid co-option. Brilliant and true. The next section in this article is entitled, "Revolution Solves Nothing Because Mankind is, quote, predisposed to Tyranny." ? The great lie being injected into the movement over the past few years is that removal of the elites will solve nothing because the real problem is the corrupt nature of humanity in general, and that if we remove one set of elites, they will simply be replaced with another set, as if society is fatally predisposed to develop an elitist class. This is the most vapid form of defeatist garbage ever regurgitated by nihilists. Now, I want to jump in on this paragraph here, because I definitely don't fully agree with the sentiment that all we need to do is take out a small percentage of people, the elite cabal, the globalists, the dark occultists, whatever you want to refer to them as, and the problem will be solved. I don't agree with that. I don't know if that's exactly the type of sentiment he's, advocating here. But what I'm saying is, without question, the ignorance of the human population is the root of the problem. And there are many people who will just step right into those roles. I mean, you just talk to people on the street. You need to go no further than outside your own home and talk to some people in your neighborhood, if you live in any kind of a metropolitan area, and ask them, would you trade places with the rulers of the world? And in a heartbeat, you'll get hundreds of people all around you saying, without any doubt, put me in their position right now. This is not, however, inherent to humanity. This is not human nature, So it's not because we are predisposed to thinking like this. It is because we are culturally engineered to think like this. It is a program that is running that has to be disinfected from the human brain, disinfected from the human soul. And that can be done. People can be re-educated by learning the truth, by learning information about consciousness, by learning information about themselves and how their minds work, how their psyches work. This is the occult information that has been held back by the elitists, the dark occultists, to gain a tactical advantage over humanity and rule them, because that population is completely ignorant of how those dynamics of nature work. So I just wanted to say that, that's my take on that. They would be replaced by another set of dark Kabbalists if nothing changes in the minds of the people, if nothing changes in the population, spiritually. So I'll continue with this article on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. We'll be right back.
Fight for the world!
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. I've been reading an article by Brandon Smith entitled Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution. We're in the last section called Revolution Solves Nothing Because Mankind is Predisposed to Tyranny, ? And he started this by, raising the argument that people bring up that, humanity is corrupt, by its nature, the corrupt nature of humanity in general. And if we take out one set of elites, then people will just replace them and, we'll have the same problem as ever. And I said that I do think that that is the case, that would happen, but not because this is our nature, but because people are so mind-controlled and conditioned that they want to be like their own enslavers. Again, this is, the concept that they have given us their mindset. A lot of people have psychopathic tendencies dwelling within them, and they would change place with their enslavers in a heartbeat, if only they could be the rulers. And that is not human nature, ladies and gentlemen. That is human conditioning. And only a deep exploration of the self and human consciousness is going to change that mentality, that mindset, that soul sickness. Because that's what it is. That's sickness of the soul. And that is not human nature. We are not born like that. So that's what I would add to that. But continuing with the article, the last couple of paragraphs. First, we have no idea whatsoever what life would be like without the globalist network because we have never lived in a society in which they have been removed, even for a single generation. I think early America after the revolution is the only example I can find of a society free from most elitist controls. And the prosperity that developed in that environment leads me to believe that removal of the entire elitist framework would result in undeniable positive changes for the world. I do agree with that. Why else would the globalists spend the past 2 centuries attempting to dismantle the Constitution and Bill of Rights? Second, if mankind is so predisposed to becoming naturally subservient to an elitist class, why do the elites feel so compelled to manipulate the masses with complex forms of propaganda and fear tactics? Exactly. Why go through all the trouble of engineering economic disparity and war? What is the point if we are all dumb animals just waiting to be ruled? The argument is nonsense. The elites spend billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, in capital and go to such extremes because oligarchy is not a natural state of man. It is so unnatural that the elites are forced to expand constant energy trying to keep us from progressing away from the slave dynamic. Exactly. From the slave mindset. I believe revolution is indeed necessary, a final revolution to remove the influence of the globalist cult once and for all. Not only their puppet governments, puppet political parties, and puppet despots, but the globalists themselves. Will bad men still exist in the world? Of course they will. But the kind of advanced and well-organized internationalist machine that exists today will no longer exist. To save a patient poisoned to the extreme, the patient must be purged until his body can recover on its own. The elites are a poison that must be physically removed from the human system. Now, there are some powerful and brilliantly written words, and I commend this gentleman on the writing of this article. I'll post it with the podcast, folks. My suggestion is to spread it to as many people as will read it, because Americans need to read that and understand what's written there. It's probably the best article or piece of writing I've seen since Aquinas wrote his small essay called On Liberty. So I want to read one more small thing from Thomas Paine from The Crisis in 1776 after this break, and then we'll go to the phones. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back.
There's a code of silence that we don't dare speak. There's a wall between us and a river so deep. We keep pretending that there's nothing wrong. There's a code of silence and it can't go on.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. So I just completed reading that great, very well-written article by Brandon Smith entitled Understanding the Fear of Self-Defense and Revolution. And it all really comes down to one dynamic, folks. It always has only ever come down to one dynamic. And that's cowardice. Something many people just don't want to hear, don't want to talk about. That's what this is all about. You know? I mean, if you haven't figured that out, you're not paying attention. Good people are just loath to do the right thing if it's going to cost them something, especially if it may cost them something physical, like their well-being or their life. You know, all these arguments that these pacifists bring up are always struck down by simple logic. Revolution, if it's righteous, isn't morally wrong. I mean, by definition, if it's revolution against tyranny, it's something that's right. That is a right. So what if the enemy has stronger technological capabilities? What does that mean? You lay down to tyranny? You lay down to evil? Because you think you can't win? That's just pure cowardice. You're not going to bother to try just because you think it'll be co-opted in the end? It's a defeatist mindset. It's a defeatist attitude. And this totally poisonous worldview of human nature. Oh, we're just evil by our inherent nature, you know? Human beings are just bad. We have a corrupt nature, and we're just predisposed to tyranny. So we should just live under it and accept our fate, right? We should just accept our lot in life. You know, it would be great if there was a place where if people wanted to go and live like that, they can go live under whatever kind of bondage they want. But unfortunately, there are people who want their freedom and are living in the same place. That's why I have a huge moral problem with mindsets like that. With arguments like what these pacifists come up with. Or these nihilists come up with. Or these moral relativists come up with. If it only affected you, you're entitled to all your beliefs, anything you want. Unfortunately, there's other people living in the world that your sick, twisted mindset is affecting. You're affecting my freedom, my rights, my life, my property. Therefore, I have a big moral problem with what these kind of people are advocating in the position of just lay down to tyranny. No, I don't think I will. Because what it comes down to is they're just cowards trying to justify their immoral position of letting evil run rampant. Want to hear the truth of the matter? That's it, folks. That's all it comes down to. So I want to read a quote by probably the greatest mind to have existed on the American continent, if you ask me. And that is Thomas Paine. who, if you want to know who was one of the architects, the real architects of the American Revolution, you need look no further. Unfortunately, most people aren't familiar with his writings because they keep his name out of American history books, largely. So they don't want people understanding what Thomas Paine understood. They don't want anybody becoming as much of an extremist as this man was, an extremist toward the truth. Because he was, in general, an anarchist and didn't believe anybody had a right to rule, didn't believe we should have instituted a new government. Wasn't there at the Continental Congress to bring in the Constitution, you know. He just wanted us to rebel against the crown and live free on the land, period, the end. Which is how it should be and how it should always be. God forbid, real freedom. You know, what are we talking about here? You know, that's sacrilege. Sacrilege against religion of authority. There is an absolutely phenomenal set of writings by Thomas Paine called The American Crisis, or simply The Crisis. Folks, if you haven't read this, you need to, because it will give you an idea of the mindset of the brilliance of this man. The first Crisis newsletter, article, essay, whatever you want to call it, was written on December 23rd, 1776, after the American Revolution had already begun. Long after, this is over a year now after Lexington and Concord, the battles of Lexington and Concord. And in this paper, Thomas Paine says this regarding why the enemy, the British troops, have chosen to make their landings or their seat of their war against the colonies the middle colonies, the middle states. Well, before they were states, the middle colonies. And namely, the middle colonies were New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And they did not choose to land their troops largely in the New England states or colonies or the southern ones. They eventually came through the southern states as well, but they didn't choose to attack New England first, which is where the revolution started. They did this strategically because they knew they wouldn't have any ideological support among the population in the New England colonies, whereas if they landed in a place where a lot of people were benefiting from the interaction with the crown, making a lot of money, were very rich, were not being oppressed the way that the people up in New England were being oppressed, that they would receive ideological support for their effort by the local populace. Or in other words, the Tories, those who were still loyalists to king and country. You know, they were still loyalists to this psychopathic boy sitting on a chair, thinking he's God on earth. A psychopathic punk clown little boy calling himself a king over men. I mean, you have to be joking. Anybody that has ever thought anything like that is legitimate is a joke. They're a joke of a human being. And all these Tories living in the middle colonies went right along with the whims of the king. Many of them. And I'll read this article and then I'm going to comment on it because it is profoundly significant to why revolutions, and specifically the American Revolution, did not succeed in the way that it could or should have, and why we're probably going to need another one. So here's the quote, and you know what? As a matter of fact, I mean, recognizing the brilliance of someone like Thomas Paine and his writings, I think on the next show after the conference in 2 weeks, again, I will not be on the air live next week because I'll be at the Free Your Mind conference speaking and hanging out with the other speakers and the attendees. So there won't be a show next week. I'll probably replay a recent show. But in 2 weeks, I think I'm going to read the entire paper, The Crisis Number 1 by Thomas Paine. But this is a small excerpt from it that I just want to bring up here tonight because of how nicely it parallels with the other articles I've read. And here's the quote. Why is it that the enemy have left the New England provinces and made these middle ones the seat of war? The answer is easy. New England is not infested with Tories, and we are. He wrote this from Pennsylvania, from right here in Philadelphia, actually, where I am at today. And, he's referring to where he's at in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that it is infested with Tories, as he says. Continuing with the quote, he says, I have been tender in raising the cry against these men and used numberless arguments to show them their danger. But it will not do to sacrifice a world either to their folly or their baseness. The period is now arrived in which either they or we must change our sentiments, or one or both must fall. And what is a Tory? Good God, what is he? I should not be afraid to go with 100 Whigs against 1,000 Tories were they to attempt to get into arms. Every Tory is a coward. For servile, slavish, self-interested fear is the foundation of Toryism. And a man under such influence, though he may be cruel, never can be brave. Thomas Paine, The American Crisis, December 23rd, 1776. Now, there are words of wisdom. And just substitute statist for Tory. Or better yet, just substitute willing slave in there. One who goes along with their enslavement, who doesn't rebel against it. Then you'd really have something that is not only accurate, but is appropriate everywhere. Every Tory is a coward. Every statist is a coward. Every willing slave is a coward that doesn't rebel against their slavery. Every order follower is a coward. So appropriate to the discussion about understanding the fear of self-defense and revolution. The psychological dynamic that is at work is cowardice that is brought about through self-loathing and through conditioning people to believe that somehow they should just accept their servitude or somehow they deserve it. And only a self-loathing person can buy into bullcrap like that. That someone is deserving of their slavery imposed upon them by psychopaths. In 2 weeks, I'll read that whole article because it makes so many other brilliant points. But I want to take calls on the air tonight. And the calls, again, I'll give the call-in number once again. The call-in number to join us, 800-313-9443. I want to hear from people on the entire topic of gun ownership, of the true meaning and purpose of the Second Amendment, the presentation that I gave over the last few weeks, and on the psychological dynamic of why people fear physical rebellion. I also would love to hear from people in places where the population has been disarmed of firearms and can really not offer any true physical resistance should their government become completely tyrannical. But really all governments today are completely tyrannical. It's their way or death, or escalating up physical violence unto death, which is called living under total coercion, which is slavery. if the truth is told the way it really is. And people are loath to admit that, because what that implies then is responsibility to physically do something, to act. And nobody wants to be the person who says something needs to be done about this. Not just talked about, but done. So let's go to the phone lines. Let's hear from Gumby in Colorado. You're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Mark?
Yes.
Yes, this is Jeff in Cambodia.
Oh, okay. I must have gotten that confused. So go right ahead, Jeff. Jeff in Cambodia. I spoke to you, I think, a couple weeks back. Welcome back to the show.
That was a couple weeks back. We got caught off at the end there. I just wanted to let you know that I'm very glad that you're out there talking about gun ownership to the extent that you are. However, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, you're a lot more optimistic about the future than I am. When you mentioned cowardice, and you mentioned, for example, the young generation being taught about Gandhi,
right,
to the exclusion, which I have no problem with, but if you're going to talk about that to the exclusion of the colonials, which in my mind was the only contract that humanity really ever had as a protection against tyranny, then what you've got is you've got a mind control. Fear is that, yes, we've got 100 million gun owners now and in America, and you know, we'd like to think that that'll make a difference. However, they don't care about those people. They'll just wait for this generation to die off, and they got the young kids who will take the microchip for free internet, bet on it. And the furthest thing from their minds is the ownership of a gun, no matter what their parents say.
Their minds are absolutely infested with outright communist propaganda in the schools today. I mean, a friend of mine, I don't know if he wants me to mention his name on the air, but, so I won't. I'll just, an anonymous friend who is in a college here locally around the Philadelphia area, recently told me that college professors who are teaching history in local colleges are telling their students that people like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong have a bad reputation laid upon them by most modern Americans, and they weren't as evil as they are portrayed to be. The two largest mass murdering dictators in probably the last several hundred years, being told to our children in schools that they weren't evil people.
Great. And the thing is, when you look at it, you just have to wonder if this next generation coming along would put up any resistance whatsoever. I personally think no. I think it's over. So I'm getting myself ready spiritually.
Jeff, stay with us through the break. I'll let you continue on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. We'll be right back.
Let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're taking your calls for the duration of the show this evening. The call-in number to join us, toll-free, 800-313-9443. We were talking to Jeff in Cambodia, and, he was alluding to the fact that he believes that the minds of the youth are so taken by the indoctrination system of public schooling that it's going to be very, very difficult to get enough of their minds freedom-oriented enough to really wage this ideological war, let alone a physical one, because so many of them are put off and told that guns are somehow a bad thing, don't get involved in that, don't understand self-defense or real freedom. And I, came back with that a friend of mine told me recently that in college classes in history, children, the classes are being taught that Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong were just well-intentioned people that were just misunderstood and just didn't get the things that they wanted to accomplish through in the right way, and they just get a bad rap by modern Americans. Two of the biggest mass murderers who starved out and executed more people than any other totalitarian regimes. They're being taught in American schools that somehow these were just well-intentioned people and they were just misunderstood by people in a wider sense, and they just get a bad reputation in the modern world. Imagine this being taught in American schools. It's an utter disgrace. Jeff, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here, Mark.
Okay.
I think you hit it right on the head. And the problem is, as you well know, it's a heck of a lot more than just the schools. At every possible angle, on the internet, anywhere you go, a massive percentage of what you see is going to be anti-gun, anti-freedom agenda. Now, people like us, I would say, and you may have commented on this on one of your early podcasts, we tend to, in our own minds, exaggerate how effective we are being. Now, I hope I'm wrong about that, but as you've intimated before, it's a minuscule percentage of the population that even thinks along the lines that we do.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, Jeff.
I have people ask me all the time, well, Jeff, if what you're saying is true, why is Alex and Steve Quayle and Mark, why are these guys not dead? Well, it's very simple. Because the powers that be don't need to kill you. They don't need to kill me.
Exactly.
All they need to do is wait for this generation to die off because they got the next one microchipped, bagged, and tagged.
They would be, if they did try to do something like that, they would be lending incredible credibility to the message that we've all spoken thus far, and they don't want to do that. They want to marginalize us through ignoring us, through not giving people in the true alternative media any real press. So I agree, the numbers are paltry. That doesn't mean we should give up, but we have a long way to go. And we have to increase our numbers by speaking the truth to everyone around us. That is what the great work is all about. Jeff, I want to thank you for the call.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
I want to thank you for the call and for the insights that you brought up. Really great. Ladies and gentlemen, another hour of calls coming at you. Toll-free number to join us, 800-313-9443. Stay with us, everyone. See you on the other side of this break.
Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom like the good book says.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com.
Mind control, natural law, the occult.
Looks like we're having a problem with the ducking on the intro music.
What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
All right, there it goes, finally ducking back down. So, into the third hour of the show, we're going to take your calls during this hour. The toll-free number to join us, 800-313-9443. Once again, toll-free, 800-313-9443. I'd like to hear people call in to talk about gun rights ownership. Gun ownership rights. I'd like to hear them talk about self-defense. Explore more this psychological fear of self-defense and physical rebellion against tyranny. You know, our ancestors didn't have a problem with it. At least not here in America, they didn't. You know, they did the right thing when the time came. It might have taken them a while to get their act together and get it in gear, but, you know, they beat back the tyrants once, and I think it needs to be done again. It's going to need to be done again at some point. Unless we can really do the great work of putting the mindset of true freedom into people, helping them to understand what rights are, helping them to understand natural law. But you look around at the colossal ignorance around us, it seems highly unlikely. The numbers that we have on that front are paltry compared to where they need to be to really affect a change in consciousness worldwide. I'm not saying that means we need to physically, you know, do this now, but I'm saying the time is going to be upon us at some point. And people need to be prepared for it. And they need to make sure they do not give up their right to self-defense ever for any reason, no matter what happens. And now is the time that is rife to watch for false flag events and human sacrifice ritualistic events that are designed specifically to inject fear into the human mind on a mass level so that people will willingly lay down their rights. And if you see anything like that occur, know that it is a staged event. I mean, as soon as it occurs, you can guarantee that's a staged event. Like all these false flags always are. So let's continue with the phones, and let's hear from Tom in California. Tom, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show.
On?
Yes.
Yeah, great show tonight.
Thank you.
Are you still there?
Yes, I said thank you.
Oh, okay. My question is of the tyranny. You know, I got a letter. I hadn't paid my taxes, and I'm a small kind of guy. Do the swap meets, sell surfboards, and that kind of thing.
Right.
I'm just wondering if they're going to be breaking down my door and dragging me away with their guns, because it's been about 10 years since I filed. And I don't make a whole lot of money, you know. And I listened to a podcast that you had last week, and you had a caller that called in, and you mentioned that, like me, you just pay cash and take cash when you, do your work, et cetera, et cetera. Have you had any type of problems with?
I won't file any paperwork. I won't put my name on any paperwork that says that there's going to be a middleman, you know. So that's just how I do things when I conduct business with people. You know, it's a verbal contract between two sovereigns, and that's it. You know,
right.
I don't give you permission to tell anybody what you paid me. So
right. I understand that, but I mean, if it's been a while, like me, and you haven't filed anything, and finally they're catching up with me, I mean, have you had that same problem, or no?
I have not, and don't really anticipate that, but they must have tracked some kind of paperwork down that you filed at some point or signed with somebody else at some point.
It's some, in the 90s, I filed, and then I just kind of dropped off the planet.
Right.
So I'm just wondering what to expect, and that is a form of
they've come at people with violence for that in the past. So I'm not going to, just make you feel good and tell you that that's not outside the realm of possibility, because it most certainly is. And therein lies the problem. The fact that someone would come at somebody with violence for you not paying them an amount that they say you must pay them. That's just extortion. It's theft. It's not voluntary. It's based on coercion and violence. And anybody would say that that's acceptable and just watch it happen is unacceptable, No,
and I'm a small kind of, time guy, just doing swap meets, selling surfboards, used bikes. I live by the beach, and I live, try to fly under the radar, and they just finally caught up with me. So I'll just kind of see what happens. But I appreciate you and all the work that you do, and you've got a great show, and I love the Thomas Paine, and do read his whole thing, after your
Absolutely.
Mind conference.
Absolutely. I definitely intend to. He was a brilliant thinker, and more people need to read his writings for certain. So, Tom, I want to thank you for that call. Great points that you raised. And, it's a shame that this is the society that we live in, and we consider it civilized, where people come at people for violence for not paying extortion fees called taxation. Just outright theft. Taking choice out of the equation, taking freedom out of the equation, and saying, whatever number we arbitrarily set, you'll pay it, because it's serfdom. Let's call it what it really is. That's serfdom and slavery, period. And if people don't see it as such, they don't see what the truth of the matter is. Let's move on to another caller, and let's hear from Elizabeth in Connecticut. Elizabeth, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to thank you very much for the video you posted. I learned a lot on the one on the real meaning of the Second Amendment. I learned a lot. I've been pretty indifferent to gun ownership, I guess, all my life. I know usually most people have one extreme opinion or the other.
Right.
And it's been a catalyst for me to sign up, to get classes. And
great.
I think what I'd also like to learn is, other methods of self-defense.
Sure. I think that's very valuable as well. Martial arts, hand-to-hand combat, things like that. You can't go wrong with that kind of knowledge, at your disposal. So it's also, something that will keep you in good shape, and it'll keep your mind in good shape as well. So I think it's definitely a valuable pursuit to get involved in other areas of self-defense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my problem has been actually finding some ways to do it. I know the gun classes out here are booked up for another couple months. I can't even sign up for that.
It's actually more popular than people would expect. Like you said, they're packed full, and it's almost like a waiting list where you're at. A lot of people are taking interest. It's a good, encouraging sign, actually, and they can also be expensive. That's why, in local groups that I work in, I volunteered if anybody is just not familiar with firearms at all and just uncomfortable and, just wants basic instruction. I would say I'm no, expert, super expert by any stretch of the imagination, but, I have a decent amount of knowledge on some basic platforms, and, would always be willing to help people out that, are liberty-minded. And I've put that offer out there to many people, locally at least. But you just got to really get involved with people that are of the same mindset, who you can trust after being around them for a while, and just go to a range with them. Make it like a fun thing to do amongst people that you hang out with. That's really what's going to bring some camaraderie amongst people who really care about the right of self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms. I think it's just, we need more community when it comes to this whole dynamic. Instead of people being atomized and on their own with it, get together and, make it a social event. I think it'll definitely bring more value to the entire endeavor.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. I'm having a hard time kind of getting started. I didn't grow up with guns.
Right.
I don't really have a network of people that
Sure.
Use them. My daughter's boyfriend does, but with his schedule, I don't know if that's something I could ever get in contact with him about. But yeah, I like that approach of finding people like that.
Sure. The same is true for me. My family didn't stress any kind of gun ownership rights, or I didn't have a background in that. I was in the Scouts when I was very young, and shot basic rifles there. But beyond that, I picked this up recently. Financial difficulty is also a big struggle when it comes to this, because it can be very, very expensive. So that's another thing that people have to take into consideration. You have to start according to your means right now, and starting is the most difficult part of it. But again, my basic suggestion would be just get in touch with some people who have already begun that endeavor. Ask for help from people that you think that who are reliable and responsible, of course, and I guarantee they'd be all too happy to help you out and get started.
Yeah, and I understand laws can differ from state to state, and
Yes.
I hear that there's some laws proposed on ammunition,
Yep.
banning ammunition. I don't know. That's obviously another motivating factor. The fact that they're talking about banning body armor, limiting ammunition.
Yep.
I don't know anything about this. I'm just learning, but
It's just
right
amazing.
there,
It's just amazing how many end runs they're trying to do against the Second Amendment that, basically states the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. I mean, there's nothing after that. That means you cannot stop somebody from maintaining or carrying protective weaponry. The end. All laws that are regarding that are invalid in every state. And no one seems to understand that. As soon as a lawmaker tries to pass a law that says you may not have this defensive weapon of any kind, it's invalid immediately on its face. And that's what we need to get across to American citizens and people throughout the rest of the world too. This is an inherent human right, period. Man cannot take that away from humanity, period. It didn't come from man. That's part of the whole root of the problem, is people don't understand rights or where they come from. That's the main crux philosophically of the problem that we face.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for enlightening me on that deeper understanding. I never hearing about some of these laws, these proposals going on always bothered me, even not being a gun owner.
Right.
And hearing that going on was just, to me, a little, that's just absolutely, that's just fishy right there.
Right.
And so that really just got me right there. And I just want to thank you again,
Absolutely.
for that video, that deeper understanding. And I realize it's going to be a constant fight for my freedom,
That's
and
right.
that's the way it is.
That's right.
That's it.
Elizabeth, I want to thank you for those sentiments, and I think you're really on the right side philosophically, and I'm glad that you got a lot of value out of the Second Amendment presentation. So thank you so much for the call.
Thank you.
You got it. Great. Let's hear from Tom in Toronto. Tom, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hey, Mark. I was just thinking about what you said earlier, about the elites, and you cut them down and then another one replaces them. I was thinking about the symbolism with the Hydra in mythology.
Yes.
With Hercules, he cuts off the heads of the Hydra and they grow back, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I mean, it's very symbolic of that dynamic for sure. That does, kind of bring to mind that there's a lot of people that just want to step right into that role. They are of that mindset. They have conditioned us with that mindset socially. And, I tell people, just go out on the street and talk to some people and say, hey, would you trade places with some of the richest, most callous people in America? If you could get to the level of, the financial level that they enjoy, and they would do it in a heartbeat. I don't want any of their money. I want to be free and left alone. The end. That's it. You really want to know what I want? That's it. It's like in the first article today. The guy was saying, I don't carry a gun because I'm in fear. I carry a gun because it allows me to remain unafraid, because I know I have the ability, the responsibility to deal with whatever problem may come my way when it comes to physical violence or coercion. And it allows me to enjoy the number one inherent human right, which is the right to be left alone.
I agree. Somebody told me once, like, if we all own guns, it would be chaos. I'm like, it would be the exact opposite.
Wow.
Because
that's big brainwashing right there.
Yeah. Why does chaos break out now? Because most people can't defend themselves.
Boy, when I'm around all my friends who are gun owners, it must be a real chaotic event, let me tell you. We're all sitting there armed, and whew, the chaos that breaks out. Man, you wouldn't even be able to imagine it, the level of chaos. I mean, it's just, this is how brainwashed people are. It's so ridiculous, Well,
yeah. Plus, like, who else but the government can commit such large-scale violence using wars, because they have the funding from taxation,
Exactly.
People, the average person who owns a firearm, all he wants to do is protect his own stuff, his own body, his own property.
That's right. Tom, we're coming up to the break. Hold on through the other side. I'll let you continue on the other side of the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone. Hey! Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry for that delay there. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We were talking in the last segment with Tom from Toronto. Tom, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you continue with your thoughts there, and then I can move on to another caller.
Okay, yeah. So like I was saying, taxation is the only way that large-scale violence can be conducted, because wars are so expensive. So really, a government or some entity that takes from others is the only one that can continue a war for the mass amount of resource expended in the process.
Without a doubt. I mean, imagine how much of all of that confiscated money is going to just control in whatever way they see fit to do it. And then they can print money as well. They could print as much money as they want and use it for control purposes. We're funding our own enslavement, which is why people have to say no and stop doing it. Just stop contributing to what these psychopaths want people to do. I just won't do it. It's most people just don't have the courage to just live a life like that. They just won't do it. Like, I'm not going to take part in that system where I'm contributing to that. I don't care what happens to me. That's the bottom line. The bottom line, it all comes down to, do you care more about comfort or do you care more about freedom and what's right? The end. That's it. And people can say whatever they want, that, if I go into a store, I buy something, there's sales tax associated with it, I'm still paying it. I'm minimizing it to the extent that it is within my power to minimize it. Nobody needs to tell me I need to go and live without technology, live out in the woods someplace. No, you go live out in the woods someplace. Somebody that says that to somebody. I'm minimizing the negative damage that I do to other people by my refusal to pay the bulk of whatever I make through my contribution of work, and that's what I can do. This whole argument, well, do nothing. Well, what? Sit there in a corner and rot and die, and not eat, not do anything, because somehow you're going to be contributing into the system. Yeah, I have to live among it to try to change it. That doesn't mean I need to be involved in it. I'm not involved in doing it, but I try to minimize my impact as much as possible. So I totally hear what you're saying. More people have to recognize that these resources that are being confiscated under duress are being put right back into the work of enslaving the very people who are paying that money, without a doubt.
On that point as well, I agree. Not only does it really the ownership of crazy amounts of land contribute to large-scale crime, but also small-scale crime. Because how many people, were just committing a mugging or just starving to death? They don't really have an option I could go out into the field, get some land, and start growing my own food. No, all this land belongs to us.
Right. Sure. The claim of the ownership on land that isn't even being used for anything. I know. It's kind of contradictory to the whole concept of ownership. It's like people aren't using it, and yet they're keeping it from other people. It's not really legitimate ownership.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for the call and for the points that you brought up. Thanks so much. And let's move on and let's hear from Jonathan in Kentucky. Jonathan, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
If you don't mind, I'd like to give some words of encouragement instead of just speaking on knowledge.
Sure.
I kind of want to help with action.
Without a doubt.
Yes. And if you guys are, anybody who's listening to this radio station, you need to buy a firearm. And I'm not saying this to be invoking any type of fear.
Sure.
But you need a very effective weapon. I've done 9 years in the infantry, so I went firsthand with people who are insurgents, which were the U.S. military inserting themselves, and I've dealt with guerrillas who are locals. And you need to at least first get a network going with your community. You need to weed out who is, a part of the system and who is like-minded, and you need to invest into a firearm. I would recommend, if you are cost efficient, to get a SKS. You and a friend throw down $100 together, and you can split 1,000 rounds of 7.62 by 39. Stock up on some 20-round TAPCO magazines that are about $4 a piece. Combat load is 6+1.
An excellent choice.
Yes.
Jonathan, stay with us. Stay with us through the break, and I'll let you continue your thoughts on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back.
The day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Taking your calls through the rest of the show. Toll-free number to join us, 800-313-9443. We were talking to Jonathan in Kentucky. Jonathan, I think you were recommending to people a choice that you thought was a good one for a semi-automatic, the Russian SKS, which is chambered in the 7.62 by 39 variant, and is pretty inexpensive and would probably be a good choice for a person getting a first semi-automatic rifle. Jonathan, are you still?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, and I would recommend, they'll have different names on them. Norinco, that's usually Chinese, but they're all formatted pretty much the same. You need to get something to hold magazines. For an infantryman, combat load is 6 + 1 or 7 mags, but you can downgrade depending on weight. You want something to hold magazines, which are the device that holds your bullets.
Right.
And you want a pouch to hold your empties, and you want to have something with water. And you want to go out with your friends and wear it all day and practice shooting with it. And you want to learn muzzle control and trigger safety. So you want to sweep your buddies when you're practicing, and you want to keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot.
There you go. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do you know what Jonathan from Kentucky just described there? He described a well-regulated militia. Continue.
And not only do you want to train to shoot, but you want to train just having the weapon with you. So find somebody that lives in a rural area and just walk with it. Walk with your friends, practice walking in what they could say in military terms, patrolling, but just get a feel of what it's like. You'll get exercise, you'll connect with the earth, and you'll get to learn the environment of where you live. And you want to start practicing with your friends. You need to find somebody that lives in a rural area.
Yep.
And yes, and
can be very difficult when you're in the deep urban jungle, as I am. But something that I would encourage, if you can do it, absolutely take advantage of that, without a doubt. That's good advice.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to add one more thing, Mark, if
Sure.
it's okay. Now, I know synchronicity has a lot to do with the things you hear, the things you see. I just wanted to make one comment. In natural law, I would perceive to work that if you don't do any action, you were forced to make a reaction. And I just wanted to say that. And when I got out of the military, my last day in the military, I just want to tell you, this is kind of odd, but I was going to my armory that day, and on the road was a dead dog. And I went on the neighbor's house and asked them if that was their dog, and they said, yes, it died. And I drug it off the road into the grass. And when I left and got in my car, it just hit me how symbolic that statement was.
Wow.
I don't know if that connects with you at all, but I just thought it was very symbolic for it being my last day, and I drug a dead dog off the road.
Amazing.
So.
I mean, like synchronicity and symbolic events like that. If you're conscious enough to pick up on them, they can have a profound impact on your consciousness. And
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. So,
yeah. And I think, and I just want to tell people the reason why I say to go outside is not so much the freedom of using your firearms, is that you really need to connect with this planet. And I know that sounds hippie, but the only way you're really going to know what you have is if you start connecting.
Exactly.
That's all I got, Mark.
Absolutely. Jonathan, thanks so much for the call.
Thank you.
Good advice there. That's what we do need to do. We need to prepare, not put all our eggs in that basket, put them into right action, into teaching people, learning for ourselves and changing our own minds, and then helping others to change theirs. But, there has to be that preparedness mindset there as well. And the advice to connect with nature and know your surroundings is also very sound. So great call there. Let's hear from Josh in California. Josh, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, I'll make this short. First, I just want to say a huge thank you to you. I've listened to every episode of the podcast. I just finished 189 yesterday, so
awesome.
I'm listening live as a treat to myself for a couple of years of hard work, and it's just been amazing, man. Just everything you've said from episode 1 till now has really resonated with what I already knew, but hearing you say it helps me come into a deeper understanding, and now I'm trying to communicate it to other people. So thanks a lot, man, for slugging through with, teaching people the difference between right and wrong.
You're very
Maybe
welcome.
Someday
Thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe someday we can get out of kindergarten and start, dealing with the graduate level material that we deserve to think about. But anyway, just on the note of guns, I wanted to tell you that I grew up in a very typical American liberal kind of household, and grew up in California, and I'm doing the hard work of admitting that I was wrong, which I think is the most important thing people can do, and realizing how conditioned I am to, or have been anyway, to not even consider owning a gun and thinking it's negative and everything. And I'm actually actively researching different kinds of firearms and getting ready to make my first purchase, and it is largely thanks to you. So
that's
I wanted you to know that this is not falling on deaf ears, and there will be 100 million and one gun owners in America pretty soon here.
That's fantastic.
And, trying to talk about this with people, because even though I'm still getting used to the idea of personally owning a gun, it clicked with me really quick that, obviously gun control is just centralizing of gun ownership by the state, and it's immoral and everything. And now I'm trying to talk about this with people, and I'm just...
Especially the state that you are in, unfortunately, Josh. I mean, California is the worst offender, probably next to New Jersey.
I was eyeing your AK and looking at Larkin Rose's AR-15 and thinking, well, I'd love to follow suit, but apparently that's not currently an option because the people just love their slavery over here, man.
It's very rough. The two worst states, I would say, are California and New Jersey, but New York and Connecticut seem to be trying to catch up. Massachusetts as well, and even Maryland. I mean, there's some really egregious transgressions against the Second Amendment going on in many states. At the same time, there's some good, positive reinforcements of the Second Amendment and gun, ownership rights going on in many states. I think 8 states in America have passed legislation firmly solidifying the right to keep and bear arms in their state legislatures. So there's some positive things going on that front as well. I think people need to put a lot more pressure just in general on bringing up the discussion of the inherent nature of the right to keep and carry defensive weaponry. I mean, I think there's a state, or at least some municipalities, that are trying to do away with concealed carry permits because they just say, carrying a defensive weapon is a human right, period. It's not something that can be permitted or, decided on whether to allow somebody to do that, and I'm totally in agreement with that. I don't think we should have concealed carry permits, getting permission from the state to engage in a right. I mean, what is that? That's just a human right.
Pretty soon it'll be walking permits and breathing permits.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I actually looked it up, and I guess the county I live in is like a May issue for concealed carry permits. Yep. And I looked it up, and they're in a county of hundreds of thousands of people. There are, I think, 80 or 90 concealed carry permits issued. It's just sad.
Yeah, that's how it is in the state of New Jersey. They have the May issue concept instituted in that Nazi-controlled state as well, and it's an extreme rarity where they will issue a concealed carry permit. If you don't give them adequate reasons according to their definition of what constitutes the right to concealed carry, then they deny it.
Yeah, I kind of want to march into the police station here, and just if they ask for a reason, just point at them and say, you're the reason I need a carry permit.
That's one of the best reasons at this point where we're at, because they're trying to just set precedents, just like the SA and SS did in Nazi Germany, that, if you disobey your commanders on the street, you'll be summarily executed. That's really where the whole thing is going ideologically. That's what they want to psychologically set in the mindset of the people, and it's just disgusting what's going on. We're losing 1,000 citizens a year to summary execution without trial by police in America. I mean, the rest of the world has to be completely laughing at us that we're taking this garbage. But Josh, great points that you brought up, and I think it's really, really great that you turned your mindset around regarding that, and it really shows your Constitution to be able to do that and admit that you were wrong about certain points of view, and then actually take action to remedy that. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Mark. Keep doing great work.
Thanks so much. You too. All right, let's hear from Ivan in Phoenix. Ivan, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Mark. Been a while.
It's great to talk with you. How have you been?
All right. Okay. A little bit busy here and there. I'm actually calling from work tonight since I changed my days off for this week so that I can make it out to the conference.
Awesome.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Oh, looking forward to seeing you.
Yep. Hey, just real quick before I get off the phone here, I recorded a couple of new podcast episodes, and my theme was Truth, Mind, Reality. A little 2-episode little presentation. If people are interested in maybe catching that, they can hear it on freeyourmindaz.com, and it's also on iTunes. But I kind of touch on what we call militia. The last time I spoke to you, I mentioned something about helpers, and that kind of over the lines of people like us that know what's going on and what needs to be done and sharing it with others. So that's the concept I threw out there in that podcast. And then also with your topic tonight, I'm noticing within the last 6 months, a lot of the TV shows and films that I'm watching, I'm really picking up a lot of sacred masculine and sacred feminine topics in the movies, where they show a lot of the women defending themselves.
Exactly.
And, it's actually taking action. And even this last Insurgent film, that had a good theme at the end, that the divergence, they were considered the people that are odd and different. But as it turns out, there's a little spoiler alert, as it turns out at the end of this movie, the people that are divergent or different were the ones that were part of an experiment to see if humanity can still generate creative, original people. And then all the other factions that were, believers in government, believers in religion, believers in science, they were the part of the problem, lack of originality, lack of creativity. So, that was pretty good in this movie showing that.
I've heard really great things about the allegorical content of this film as well. I haven't checked it out yet, but I definitely intend to.
Right, and then going back to some of the classics that you've talked about, I recently rewatched the Matrix trilogy, and everyone knows about the original one, all the allegories in there, but I was very pleasantly surprised with the third Matrix trilogy, Matrix film Revolutions, and that hinted strongly to militias also, because when the Sentinels attack Zion, not only are the soldiers or the warriors or the fighters fighting, you see the women. The women are creating explosives, the missiles, they're helping attack. So it's, again, showing that it's everybody's, responsibility to defend.
This theme was also brought up in the last Hobbit film, the Battle of the Five Armies, where the women became involved in the effort to fight against the insurgency of the orcs, and they took up arms as well toward the end of that film. So that was another. Jupiter Ascending also had the theme of the sacred feminine aspect of having to care for a wider aspect, not just yourself and your family dynamic, but care for all, which I thought was a good theme within it. I didn't like the implementation of the actual film so much, dramatically, but the underlying theme was excellent. That she had to make, the main heroine of the film had to make a decision between whether she was going to protect her own and her family's interests, or whether she was going to extend her care to a wider extent to encompass all of humanity, which I thought was a good theme.
Right. And then also, like on social media, with a lot of the Facebook videos that we're seeing with the police brutality and stuff.
Yes.
Just recently, I saw one yesterday or the day before where there was a high-speed chase going on, and the car that was being chased crashed into a couple of other civilian, cars that were parked there, and two individuals came out of one, the vehicle that was struck, and they pulled the guy out of the car that struck them and, held him down until, unfortunately the cult members came to arrest him. But that also showed, regular people taking responsibility and, not just standing there with their camera phones and waiting for somebody else. They sprung into action and did something. And if that can be done with, a guy that rams into them, I'm hoping that people can step it up, into more important situations, like when police are killing other people, instead of recording it, to jump in and actually start stopping that.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty much all I got for today. I got to start heading back to work, but I'll be seeing you this weekend, and that's about it.
Absolutely, Ivan. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and I'll see you at the Free Your Mind 3 conference this coming weekend.
All right, take care, Mark.
You got it. All right. Let's hear from Paul in Montgomery. Paul, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. How's it going?
Doing well. Yourself?
Very well, sir. I was prompted to call by that sweet young lady that was talking about considering owning a firearm.
Yes.
And it just struck me, because of her honesty. And I am 61 years old. I've lived most of my life with a policy of not owning a firearm until a couple of years ago when I realized for obvious reasons I needed to change that policy, and I did. So I began to do the research, and so I just want to pass on a couple introductory items that may help her.
Sure. Paul, hold on to that through the break. I'll let you continue that right on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back.
Penetrate the
Welcome back, everyone. Last segment for this edition of What on Earth is Happening. We were talking to Paul. Paul, you were just about to give some advice for a potential new firearms owner. I'll let you continue with your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I would say just what I would recommend what I did, and that is to go slow, to do her research, and to meet people, try to find venues that she can meet people that are gun owners. I want to say right up front, the statistics show that gun owners are some of the most responsible people in America. They're very even-headed folk, and they are not looking for trouble. In fact, it's quite the contrary. They are looking to avoid trouble.
That's right.
And they are prepared for at the last element that's there. They are prepared to defend themselves.
Correct.
With that being said, I mean, they're very balanced folk. With that being said, there's plenty of things I could recommend, but I recommend two sites, YouTube sites. That's Hickok 45. That's HICKOK 45. This is a marksman. He's an older gentleman who reviews all sorts of guns.
I'm very familiar with that channel, and it's an excellent one.
And the next one is another one that you would be aware of, and that's Nuttin' Fancy. That's NUTNFANCY. Nuttin' Fancy is a retired colonel, a young man who reviews guns. Now, there's a particular talk that he gives. Actually, he gives several talks on top of his many reviews of guns. But there's a particular talk I would recommend for everyone who's already a gun owner and has plenty of experience. Go listen to it. And it's called The Concealed Carry Protocol. The Concealed Carry Protocol, where he discusses all the ways of avoiding issues. Just because there's an issue there don't mean you're supposed to get involved simply because you're Mr. Big Guy with a gun. You're supposed to look for every opportunity not to get involved, but you still observe. I guess the overall commentary on that is when you do your training and you become good with your pistol, you become there's a term called situational awareness. I now, when I walk into a convenience store, when I pull into a parking lot of a Best Buy or wherever I go, I'm aware more now than I have ever have been of my surroundings. It's not like I'm suspicious. So I'm very casually looking at what's going on around me. Whereas before, I would just blindly enter into situations and not even think.
Right.
Now I am very aware, and In fact, when I got my concealed carry license after I bought my pistol, all the way home, I had a profound peace. It's not like you would think it would be the opposite, but actually I had this profound peace, and my awareness around me expanded dramatically.
And expanded awareness carries with it even more responsibility. Becoming
Absolutely.
a gun owner actually makes you a more responsible human being. That's
Amen.
what this is all ultimately about. Paul, phenomenal call to end the show on. That's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening, folks. Remember, there are only 2 mistakes you can ever make on the path to truth: not starting and not going all the way. Thanks so much. I really hope to see a lot of you at the Free Your Mind 3 conference this coming weekend in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, April 10th, 11th, and 12th. I'll see you right here in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, everyone. Good night.